A man walks to a gate, agent his first-class ticket in hand. He's earned it a top-tier member of the airline's loyalty program for a decade. He's dressed for a long-haul flight, a simple cashmere hoodie and comfortable trousers. The gate manager takes one look at him at the color of his skin and decides he doesn't belong. She denies his upgrade, giving it to a white couple with a fraction of his status. She smirks as she hands him a new boarding pass for the Bacchus of the plane. What she doesn't know is that the man she just humiliated isn't just another passenger. He's Elias Vance, the phantom investor who just bought a $400 million stake in her company, and her condescending smirk has just cost her everything. This is the story of how a single act of prejudice triggered a corporate earthquake. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 had a weight to it. It wasn't just the humidity of a late New York summer, clinging to thousands of bodies in transit. It was an atmosphere thick with hurry anxiety and the faint metallic scent of jet fuel. For most, this was a place of frantic energy, a necessary purgatory between one life and another. For Elias Vance, it was simply a place of observation. He sat near gate B26, watching the river of humanity flow by. He wore a dark grey hoodie, the fabric a soft, luxurious cashmere that went unnoticed by most, paired with tailored black athletic trousers and a pair of pristine, minimalist sneakers from a niche Swiss brand. On his wrist was a Patek Philippe watch, its face understated and elegant, a quiet testament to a fortune built not on inheritance, but on relentless innovation. To the casual observer, he was just another traveler, perhaps a musician or an athlete, comfortable and anonymous. That was exactly how he preferred it. Elias was flying to London Heathrow on Aura Airlines Flight 110. He'd been flying this route for years. First as a struggling startup founder in economy, crammed into a middle seat with a laptop full of code and a dream that felt impossibly distant. Then as his AI logistics company, Nexus Flow, began to soar, he'd graduated to premium economy, the extra legroom a symbol of his slow, arduous climb. For the past decade, he'd flown exclusively in the plush cocoons of first or business class. He was an Aura Airlines Apex Circle member, the highest, almost mythical tier of their loyalty program, reserved for those who practically lived at 35,000 feet. His phone buzzed. It was a message from his financial advisor. Wire transfer confirmed. The 8.5% stake is officially yours. You are now the largest individual shareholder in Aura Air Group. Congratulations, Mr. Vance. A ghost of a smile touched Elias's lips. It was done. After months of quiet, aggressive acquisition through his private equity firm, Vance Capital, he had secured a massive controlling interest in the airline. The board knew a major investor had been buying up stock, but they didn't know who. They had invited the mysterious new stakeholder to a critical board meeting in London in 2 days. They were expecting a faceless corporation, a hedge fund from Dubai or Singapore. They were not expecting him. He had invested for a simple reason: he saw inefficiency. Nexus Flow had revolutionized ground-based logistics, predicting and solving supply chain problems before they happened. He saw the same potential in air travel. Aura, once a titan of the skies, was lagging. Their technology was antiquated, their customer service was inconsistent, and their stock was undervalued. He saw it not as a failing company, but as a flawed gem he could polish into brilliance. His pre-requested first-class upgrade, a standard perk for his status, hadn't been confirmed at check-in. The app simply said, "See agent at gate." Annoying but not unusual with last-minute aircraft swaps. He gathered his carry-on, a sleek leather duffel, and walked towards the bustling gate desk. A young woman with a nervous energy and a name tag that read Sarah was fielding questions from a dozen anxious passengers. Elias waited patiently in the priority line. When his turn came, he offered a warm, disarming smile. "Hi there, Sarah. Elias Vance. I'm on flight 110, just checking on my upgrade status for seat 1A. He slid his passport and Apex Circle card across the counter. Sarah's eyes widened slightly as she saw the obsidian black card. "Of course, Mr. Vance. Let me check that for you." She typed furiously, her brow furrowed. That's strange. The system shows the first-class cabin is full, but your upgrade request is still pending. I see your status. You should have been cleared first. Before she could investigate further, a sharp, imperious voice cut through the air. "Is there a problem here, Sarah?" A woman in her late 40s with a severe haircut and a uniform so starched it looked like it could stand on its own, strode over. Her name tag read, Catherine Sterling, Gate Operations Manager. Her eyes scanned Elias from head to toe, and her polite smile didn't quite reach them. The smile was a mask, and behind it a switch had been flipped. Her gaze lingered on his hoodie, his sneakers, and the color of his skin. It was a fractional hesitation, a micro-calculation that Elias had seen 1,000 times before. It was the look that questioned his presence, his legitimacy, his right to be standing in this line, asking for this seat. This gentleman was just inquiring about his upgrade. Sarah said, her voice now timid. Catherine took the passport from Sarah's hand, her painted nails tapping impatiently on the counter. "Mr. Vance," she said, the name sounding foreign and inconvenient in her mouth. "I see. The first-class cabin is completely booked. We will not be processing any more upgrades for this flight." Elias kept his tone even. "My status guarantees an upgrade if a seat is available at the 24-hour mark. I checked this morning and there were 3 empty seats in the cabin. I am booked in business, so it should be a simple process." Catherine's smile tightened. "Sir, our cabins are dynamic. Situations change. We have to accommodate crew rest requirements and last-minute full-fare ticket purchases." She spoke with an air of finality, as if explaining a complex law of physics to a child. "There are no available seats." She wasn't looking at her screen. She was looking at him. Elias knew with a certainty that settled like a cold stone in his gut that this had nothing to do with procedure. This was a decision about him. "I'd appreciate it if you could just double-check the manifest," Elias insisted politely. "Seat 1A was available just a few hours ago." Catherine let out a sigh, a theatrical display of exhausted patience. "Sir, I am the manager here. I know the status of my flight. There are no seats." She turned to Sarah. "Finalize the standby list for economy. We need to get this flight out on time." She dismissed him, turning her back to address another issue. The message was clear. "You are done here. Move along." Elias stood his ground, a quiet statue in the chaotic current of the terminal, the black Apex Circle card still sitting on the counter, a silent, ignored testament to his loyalty. The confrontation had just begun, and Catherine Sterling had no idea she was arguing with the man who now, for all intents and purposes, owned the plane she was standing next to. A few minutes passed. Elias didn't move. He wasn't a man who raised his voice or caused a scene. His power lay in his stillness, in his unnerving ability to wait. His silence was a question mark that hung in the air, making Sarah visibly uncomfortable and drawing the attention of other passengers in the priority lane. Catherine, sensing the unresolved tension, turned back, her facade of politeness cracking. "Sir, is there something else you are holding up the line for our other valued guests?" The emphasis on other was not lost on Elias. "Yes," he said calmly. "There is. I've spent over $1 million with this airline over the last decade. My corporate account Nexus Flow funnels another $2 million a year through your transatlantic routes. That valued guest status was earned. I would just like the courtesy of you verifying what you're telling me on your computer screen." A murmur rippled through the nearby passengers. Catherine's face flushed a delicate shade of pink. She had been challenged, her authority questioned in her own domain. It was clear she saw this not as a customer service issue, but as an act of insubordination. Just then, a well-dressed white couple in their 50s, the Millers, approached the counter from the side. Mr. Miller, flushed and flustered, addressed Catherine directly, waving his boarding passes. "Excuse me, Catherine, we were told to check with you about a possible upgrade. We're gold status." Catherine's entire demeanor shifted in an instant. The icy wall of corporate procedure melted away, replaced by a warm, conspiratorial smile. "Ah, Mrs. Miller. Of course. Let me just see what I can do for you." She turned to her terminal, pointedly ignoring Elias, who was still standing directly in front of her. Her fingers danced across the keyboard. Elias watched, his expression unreadable, as the very action he had requested was now being performed for someone else. "Oh, it looks like we've had 2 last-minute cancellations in first class," Catherine announced, with theatrical surprise, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "How fortunate, seats 2D and 2F. I can process that for you right now." The lie was so bald, so audacious, that it almost took Elias's breath away. Not 1, but 2 seats had magically materialized. He glanced at the departure board. The flight was listed as final boarding. Last-minute cancellations were a fantasy. These were the seats that had been there all along. Sarah, the younger agent, looked from her screen to Elias, then to Catherine. Her face a mask of panicked disbelief. She knew what her manager was doing. She knew it was wrong. But the sharp, warning glance Catherine shot her way was enough to silence any potential protest. Sarah looked down her hands, trembling slightly as she continued to tag a bag. "Oh, that's wonderful," Mrs. Miller gushed. "Thank you so much, Catherine. You are a lifesaver." "It is my absolute pleasure," Catherine beamed, printing out new boarding passes. "We always strive to take care of our most loyal customers. Enjoy your flight." As the Millers walked away, giddy with their unexpected luck, Catherine turned her attention back to Elias. The warm smile vanished, replaced by a cold, triumphant finality. She picked up his Apex Circle card between her thumb and forefinger, as if it were something distasteful, and slid it back across the counter. "As I said, sir," she stated, her voice dripping with condescension, "there are no available upgrades. Your original seat in Business 22B is still waiting for you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a flight to dispatch." The injustice was breathtaking. It wasn't just a denial of service. It was a public and deliberate humiliation. She had looked at him, a black man in a hoodie, and made a judgment. She had decided he was unworthy, a fraud, or someone who simply didn't fit her mental image of a first-class passenger. She had then manufactured a reality to support that judgment, giving his rightful seat to a white couple with a lower status right in front of his eyes. Other passengers were now staring openly, some with sympathy, some with discomfort, others with an indifference that was its own form of judgment. Elias calmly took his card and his passport. He looked directly into Catherine Sterling's eyes. He didn't show anger or frustration. He showed nothing but a deep, unnerving calm. "Thank you, Catherine," he said, his voice level. "You've been very illuminating." He turned and walked towards the jet bridge, leaving her with a smirk of victory on her face. She believed she had won. She had put a man she deemed out of place back in his place. She had asserted her small measure of power. As Elias walked down the carpeted ramp, the muffled sounds of the terminal fading behind him. He wasn't thinking about the discomfort of seat 22B. He wasn't thinking about the champagne he wouldn't be drinking or the lie-flat bed he wouldn't be sleeping in. He was thinking about corporate rot. He was thinking about how a culture of prejudice embodied by one gate manager could poison an entire company from the ground up. The problem with Aura Airlines wasn't just its outdated booking software or its inefficient logistics. It was this cancer of perception. He had planned to spend his first week as an investor, quietly observing from the inside, gathering data before the big board meeting. Catherine Sterling had just fundamentally changed his agenda. She had just unknowingly volunteered to be the centerpiece of his presentation. The flight to London would no longer be a commute. It would be a 7-hour case study. The business class cabin on Aura's Boeing 737 was comfortable by any objective standard, but for Elias it felt like a cage. From his aisle seat, 22B, he had a clear view of the curtain separating his cabin from the hallowed ground of first class. It was just a thin piece of fabric, but at that moment it represented a barrier of prejudice, a line drawn in the sand by one woman's bigotry. He settled in, stowing his duffel in the overhead bin. A flight attendant, a kind-faced woman named Maria, offered him a pre-departure drink. He asked for a sparkling water. As she handed it to him, he saw her glance at his boarding pass, then back at his face, a flicker of professional curiosity in her eyes. Apex Circle members were rare, and they almost never sat this far back. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Vance," she said, her smile genuine. "It's a pleasure to have you with us. Please let me know if there's anything at all I can do to make your flight more comfortable." "Thank you, Maria. I appreciate that," he replied. Her warmth was a stark contrast to Catherine's icy dismissiveness. As the plane taxied to the runway, Elias pulled out a small leather-bound notebook and a pen. This was his process, how he had built his MR Observe document, Analyze Act. He started with the boarding. It was chaotic. Catherine's decision at the gate had created a ripple effect of confusion, and the flight was clearly behind schedule. He noted the stressed expressions on the faces of the cabin crew as they tried to manage the disorganized flow of passengers. Note 1. Gate-to-cabin communication is disjointed. Staff appear overworked and unsupported. Low morale is a direct drag on efficiency and customer experience. Once airborne, the service began. He watched Maria handle the entire business-class cabin section with a grace that bordered on heroic. She was attentive, personable, and efficient. But she was just one person. A passenger in the row ahead of him spilled a glass of red wine. Maria was there in a flash, cleaning it up with practiced ease, but it took her away from her other duties for a full 10 minutes. Another passenger's entertainment system was malfunctioning. Again, Maria had to stop everything to troubleshoot. Note 2. Cabin is understaffed. Crew-to-passenger ratio is too high for a premium cabin. This model is unsustainable and relies on exceptional individuals like Maria to prevent constant service failures. What happens when the crew member isn't exceptional? He ate the meal, a dry piece of chicken with overcooked vegetables. It was edible, nothing more. He remembered the menu proposals he had reviewed in his research on Aura. The airline was paying a premium for a high-end catering service, but what was being served bore no resemblance to what was promised on paper. Somewhere between the contract and the tray table, quality was being lost. Note 3: supply chain leakage. Catering contract not being fulfilled. Lack of quality control. Are we paying for filet mignon and serving Salisbury steak? About 2 hours into the flight, he got up to stretch his legs. He walked towards the galley at the front of the business class cabin. Maria was there, taking a rare moment to herself, rubbing her tired feet. "Everything all right, Mr. Vance?" she asked. "Everything's fine, thank you, Maria. You're doing a fantastic job. It can't be easy managing all this on your own." Her professional mask slipped for a second, revealing a genuine weariness. "We're a bit short-staffed today," she admitted with a sigh. "Seems to be the new normal. They keep cutting costs, but the passenger expectations stay the same." She stopped realizing she might be oversharing. "But we manage." "I have a question for you," Elias said gently. "First class, is it completely full tonight?" Maria hesitated, looking over her shoulder as if Catherine Sterling might materialize from the cockpit. Off the record, she whispered, "Completely." She leaned in slightly. "No. Seat 1A is empty. We call it a ghost seat. It happens sometimes when the gate manager blocks a seat for a VIP who never shows, or for a pilot who ends up on a different flight. It's a waste, especially when we have Apex members sitting back here." She gave him a knowing look. "The gate manifest says it was blocked for operational reasons, but the captain confirmed he didn't need it. It's been empty since we left New York." There it was, the final damning piece of evidence. Catherine hadn't just lied about the availability of 2 seats. She had actively kept a seat empty, presumably his requested seat 1A, rather than give it to him. She would rather let a $15,000 seat fly across the Atlantic unoccupied than accommodate a black man in a hoodie. The sheer spite of it was what struck him. This wasn't just a matter of unconscious bias. This was a deliberate act of malice. "Thank you," Maria Elias said, his voice quiet but firm. "You've been very helpful." He returned to his seat, the knowledge settling heavily within him. He opened his laptop, ignoring the spotty Wi-Fi, and began to type. He wasn't drafting a complaint letter. He was restructuring his entire approach for the board meeting. His initial plan had been to focus on logistics, technology integration, and fleet modernization. It was a numbers and systems presentation. Now it would have a new introduction, a prologue, a story about a flight from New York to London. He would detail the gate experience not as a bitter passenger, but as a primary shareholder, analyzing a critical flaw in the company's most valuable asset, its brand. He would talk about the tangible cost of low employee morale, the inefficiency of poor gate management, and the massive, incalculable liability of systemic prejudice. Catherine Sterling thought she had relegated him to seat 22B. She had no idea she had just given him a front-row seat to the very soul of the company he now owned. And from this vantage point, he could see everything that was broken. The descent into London was shrouded in a familiar grey mist. As the Boeing 707 broke through the clouds, the sprawling, intricate tapestry of the city emerged a sight that usually filled Elias with a sense of purpose and opportunity. Today it felt different. It felt like a destination, a finish line for a race he hadn't intended to run. The plane touched down at Heathrow with a gentle thud. As it taxied towards the terminal, the familiar chime rang through the cabin, signaling the end of the journey and the beginning of a new phase of his plan. The curtain to first class was pulled back, and he watched the Millers emerge, looking refreshed and content, chattering about their wonderful flight. They passed his row without a glance. Elias waited patiently for his turn to deplane, a stark contrast to the scrum of passengers jostling for position in the aisle. He gave Maria a nod of thanks as he passed the galley. She returned it with a small, empathetic smile. She knew. He walked through the jet bridge and into the vast, impersonal arrivals hall of Terminal 5. While others rushed towards immigration, Elias stepped to the side, pulling out his phone. He scrolled through his contacts past world leaders and tech billionaires until he found the name he was looking for: Robert Harrison, CEO, Aura Air Group. He had Harrison's private cell number, a closely guarded secret provided by the M&A team that had brokered the stock acquisition. They had spoken once, a brief formal introduction a week ago, where Elias had remained anonymous, identified only as a representative for Vance Capital. Harrison was expecting another call to arrange the details for the upcoming board meeting. He was not expecting this call. Elias pressed the button. It rang twice. Robert Harrison. The voice was crisp, professional, and carried the faint, harried undertone of a man perpetually running a global corporation. Robert. "It's Elias Vance," he said, his voice calm, and measured the ambient noise of the airport, a distant hum. There was a brief pause. "Mr. Vance, an unexpected pleasure. I was just discussing your upcoming visit with my assistant. I trust your travels were satisfactory. It was a standard corporate pleasantry, a throwaway line." Elias let the question hang in the air for a second before answering. "My flight was illuminating, Robert. That's actually why I'm calling." The tone of the conversation shifted instantly. Harrison, a CEO for 20 years, was an expert at discerning nuance. He could hear the steel beneath the calm. "Illuminating? Is there an issue I should be aware of? I've just landed at Heathrow on one of your aircraft, Flight 110 from JFK. Elias began. "I have a few preliminary observations I thought you should hear before our meeting on Wednesday. Consider it a live-action field report from your new largest shareholder." Harrison was silent, but Elias could almost hear the man sitting up straighter in his office chair across the city. First, Elias continued, "Your ground operations at JFK are being managed by personnel who are actively sabotaging your brand and alienating your highest-value customers. Second, your cabin crew is understaffed to a critical degree, leading to service degradation and burnout. Third, your supply chain for in-flight services is broken, and you are not receiving the quality you're paying for. And finally, and most importantly, you have a systemic cultural problem of prejudice that is not just a moral failing, but a significant unquantified financial liability." He delivered the points without emotion, like a surgeon listing diagnoses. He didn't mention his name, his seat, or the upgrade. He kept it high-level strategic. It was more damning that way. The silence on the other end of the line was profound. Robert Harrison was a man who dealt in quarterly reports, stock fluctuations, and union negotiations. He was used to problems he could see on a spreadsheet. This was something different. This was a direct surgical strike at the heart of his operation from a man who now held a terrifying amount of power. Mr. Vance, Harrison finally said, his voice now stripped of all pleasantries. "These are extremely serious allegations. Could you provide specifics? I'll provide a full detailed analysis at the board meeting, complete with actionable recommendations," Elias replied. "I've already begun preparing the presentation. However, I want you to look into the operational record of Flight 110, which departed JFK this evening. Specifically, I want you to cross-reference the first-class manifest, with the list of Apex Circle members on that flight. I want you to find out why Seat 1A flew empty. And I want you to get a name. The name of the gate operations manager on duty." He let that sink in. He had given Harrison a thread. He knew that a man like Harrison, his position now implicitly threatened, would pull on that thread until the entire tapestry unraveled. "I will look into this personally, Mr. Vance." Immediately, Harrison said, his voice tight. "I can assure you Aura Airlines does not tolerate the kind of behavior you're implying." "Good," Elias said, "because I don't tolerate investing $400 million in a company that does. My car is here. I'll see you on Wednesday. Robert." He hung up, leaving the CEO of Aura Air Group stewing in a potent cocktail of fear and curiosity. Elias stood for a moment watching the signs directing passengers to baggage claim and ground transport. He had just fired a warning shot, a precise and powerful missile aimed directly at the executive suite. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't filed a complaint. He had simply presented a series of business problems to the man paid to solve them. Catherine Sterling, in her moment of prejudiced victory at gate B26, thought she was dealing with a lone passenger. She had no idea she had just become the central topic of conversation between her CEO and the most powerful new force in the company. The wheels of corporate karma were beginning to turn, and they were far larger and more unforgiving than she could ever imagine. The Aura Air Group headquarters was a monument of glass and steel in Canary Wharf, designed to project an image of sleek, modern authority. Inside on the 48th floor, the boardroom was a sanctuary of hushed power. A long, polished mahogany table reflected the overcast London sky. Leather chairs, each costing more than a transatlantic flight, were arranged with geometric precision. At the head of the table sat Robert Harrison, his face a grim, unreadable mask. He had spent the last 36 hours in a state of controlled panic. He had pulled the thread Elias Vance had given him, and the results had horrified him. He had the flight manifest, the passenger list, and a full report from a terrified JFK station director. He had a sworn statement from a gate agent named Suri, and he had the security footage. He knew everything. The only thing he didn't know was what Elias Vance looked like. The investor had been a ghost operating through layers of lawyers and investment bankers. The members of the board filed in a collection of silver-haired men and impeccably dressed women who made up the old guard of the British and American aviation industry. They murmured amongst themselves, the topic of conversation being the mysterious Vance Capital, and the man who now held their company's fate in his hands. They were expecting a ruthless corporate raider, a titan in a Savile Row suit. At precisely 10:00 a.m., the boardroom doors opened. Robert Harrison's executive assistant, a poised woman named Eleanor, stepped in. "Mr. Harrison, members of the board. Mr. Elias Vance." Elias walked in. He was not wearing a suit. He was dressed in a tailored navy blue blazer over a simple white t-shirt, dark trousers, and the same minimalist sneakers he'd worn on the flight. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who belonged in any room he chose to enter. A wave of stunned silence washed over the boardroom. This was not the man they were expecting. He was young, he was black, and he radiated an aura of calm technological disruption, not old-world corporate power. Robert Harrison's face went pale. He stood up, his professional composure momentarily shattered. He recognized him instantly from the high-resolution photo attached to the JFK incident report. It was the man from Flight 110, the man in the hoodie, the Apex Circle member who had been publicly humiliated by his own staff. Mr. Vance Harrison managed extending a hand. "Welcome. We are honored to finally meet you." Elias shook his hand, his grip firm. His eyes swept across the room, meeting the gaze of each board member. "The pleasure is all mine. Thank you for accommodating me." He took a seat opposite Harrison, placing a slim tablet on the table in front of him. There were no piles of paper, no entourage of assistants. Just him. "I know you're all curious about the man behind Vance Capital and my intentions for this company." Elias began, his voice filling the silent room. "My background is not in aviation. It's in predictive logistics. My company, Nexus Flow, which I sold to Oracle for a significant sum last year, transformed how global shipping companies manage their assets. I see the same opportunity here. Not just to improve, but to revolutionize." He tapped his tablet, and the large screen at the end of the room lit up. But it didn't show financial projections or fleet acquisition plans. It showed a grainy, time-stamped image from a JFK security camera. It showed Gate B26. It showed Elias standing at the counter. It showed Catherine Sterling, her expression a mask of condescension. It showed the Millers smiling as they received their new boarding passes. "Before we discuss the future of Aura Airlines," Elias said, his voice dangerously soft, "we need to have an honest conversation about its present. 2 days ago, I took Flight 110 from New York to this city. I did so not as an investor, but as a customer. An Apex Circle customer, your highest tier of loyalty. What I experienced was not an isolated incident of poor service. It was a symptom of a deep cultural disease that is poisoning this company from the inside out." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't sound angry or vengeful. He spoke like a Wharton business professor, presenting a case study, his tone analytical and precise. He laid out the facts one by one. The initial inquiry, the lie about the full cabin, the preferential treatment given to lower status passengers based on, as he put it, a visual profiling inconsistent with company policy. He detailed his conversation with Maria, the flight attendant, and the confirmation of the empty ghost seat 1A. The manager on duty, a Ms. Catherine Sterling, made a decision. Elias explained, looking directly at Harrison. She decided that a $15,000 seat should fly empty across the Atlantic, rather than be occupied by a customer who did not fit her preconceived notion of who belongs in first class. This is not about a denied upgrade. It's about the staggering level of mismanagement and brand damage one employee is empowered to inflict. He swiped on his tablet. A new slide appeared filled with data. Let's quantify the damage. The immediate loss is the price of the seat. But the real cost, the lifetime value of an Apex Circle member, is on average $1.8 million. If Ms. Sterling has done this just 10 times in her career, and I suspect the number is far higher, that's an $18 million loss in revenue from a single mid-level manager. Now multiply that by every manager in your system with a similar bias. The numbers become astronomical. This isn't a human resources issue, ladies and gentlemen. This is a fiscal crisis. The board was captivated, horrified. They had been prepared for a fight over dividends and stock buybacks. They were now being confronted with the ugly, rotten core of their own corporate culture, exposed by the very man who could now force their hands. Elias let the weight of his words settle in the room. My investment in Aura Airlines was a vote of confidence in its potential, not its reality. The reality, as I experienced it, is a company with a broken customer promise, demoralized employees, and a culture that allows prejudice to override profit. Before we talk about new airplanes or expanded routes, we need to talk about this. Because if we don't fix the soul of this company, the rest is just cosmetic." He looked at Robert Harrison, whose face was ashen. So Robert Elias asked, his voice now holding a sharp executive edge. "Tell me, what have you done about Ms. Catherine Sterling?" The question hung in the air, a guillotine waiting to fall. The board meeting had been hijacked. It was now a trial. Robert Harrison felt a cold sweat prickle his brow. Every eye in the boardroom was on him waiting. The power dynamic in the room had irrevocably shifted. He was no longer the chairman leading a meeting. He was a subordinate being called to account. He cleared his throat, his voice tight. "Mr. Vance, Elias, your experience is indefensible. It is a profound failure on our part, and I offer you my deepest, unreserved apology. As for the employee in question, I initiated a full investigation the moment we spoke." Harrison gestured to his assistant, who discreetly placed a folder in front of him. He opened it, though he already knew the contents by heart. "The investigation which concluded this morning confirms every detail you outlined." Harrison stated, his voice now firm, regaining a sliver of his executive authority. "We have sworn statements, internal communications records, and of course the security footage, which is damning." He paused, looking directly at Elias. "We discovered this was not an isolated incident. Ms. Sterling has been the subject of 17 informal customer complaints over the past 2 years, citing dismissive behavior, with a disproportionate number of those complaints coming from non-white passengers. These were flagged by the system, but were consistently dismissed by her direct supervisor at JFK, who noted her efficiency in on-time departures." Elias nodded slowly. The rot was deeper than just one manager. It was a systemic failure of oversight, a culture that prized punctuality over people, and Ms. Sterling herself. Elias pressed his gaze unwavering. "Her employment with Airlines was terminated effective 1 hour ago," Harrison announced. The words landed with the finality of a gavel strike, a career of 20-plus years erased in a moment. But Elias knew the real karma wasn't just in the firing, it was in the how. The narrative shifted, and for a moment, the story left the London boardroom and flew back across the Atlantic to the sterile, fluorescent-lit offices of JFK's Terminal 4. Catherine Sterling had arrived at work that morning, feeling invincible. The previous 2 days had been perfectly normal. The London flight had departed on time, and the man in the hoodie was a distant, satisfying memory of a minor annoyance professionally handled. She was sipping her morning coffee, reviewing staffing schedules, when she was summoned to the office of the station director, a man named Michael Corrigan. She walked in with a confident stride, assuming she was being consulted on a logistical matter. Michael was at his desk, his face grim. Seated in one of the guest chairs was a woman from corporate HR. This was not a logistics meeting. "Catherine, have a seat," Michael said, his tone devoid of its usual collegial warmth. She sat, a flicker of unease starting to dance in her stomach. "We need to talk about Flight 110 on Monday evening," Michael began. "There was an incident at the gate regarding a passenger, an Apex Circle member named Elias Vance." Catherine's heart began to beat a little faster. "I recall the gentleman," she said, forcing a calm, professional tone. "He was being rather insistent about an upgrade into a full cabin. I handled it according to procedure." "Did you?" Michael asked, sliding a printed photo across the desk. It was a still from the security camera. Her at the counter with Elias. "Our procedure is to check the manifest when a top-tier passenger makes a request. Did you check the manifest before you initially denied him? The cabin was full. I knew it was full. She insisted, her voice hardening. Then perhaps you can explain. This? Michael said, sliding another paper over. It was the final manifest for Flight 110. Circled in red ink was Seat 1A unoccupied. Why did a first-class seat fly empty when our highest-value customer was requesting it? Catherine stared at the paper. The lie was exposed black and white. It was an operational hold. For crew rest, she stammered, falling back on jargon. The captain filed a report stating he never requested a hold. The HR woman interjected, her voice flat and emotionless. We also have a statement from the gate agent, Sarah Jensen, who confirms that you overrode her and refused to check the system, only to find 2 seats moments later for a lower status couple. Catherine's face went white. Sarah had talked. The little mousy girl had betrayed her. She's just a child. She was confused. We have the footage, Catherine. Michael said, his voice laced with weary disappointment. We see you deny the request. We see you turn him away. We see you immediately accommodate Mir and Mrs. Miller. The entire interaction is on video. The room began to feel small, the air thin. She was trapped. Her carefully constructed world of rules and authority was crumbling around her. This was a simple customer service issue. She tried, her voice pleading now. Perhaps I made a mistake, a judgment call that has brought this company to the brink of a corporate catastrophe. Michael cut in. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into hers. Catherine, do you have any idea who Elias Vance is? She shook her head, numb. Michael took a deep breath. Elias Vance isn't just an Apex Circle member. As of this week, through his firm, Vance Capital, he is the single largest individual shareholder of Aura Air Group. The man you refuse to allow into first class owns a larger piece of this airline than anyone else on the planet. He is currently in our London boardroom, with the CEO and the entire board using a recording of you as the prime example of why this company is fundamentally broken. The blood drained from Catherine's face. The floor seemed to drop out from beneath her. It wasn't possible. The man in the hoodie, the quiet, unassuming man she had dismissed with a smirk, owned them, owned her. The HR woman slid a final set of papers across the desk. A termination agreement. Your actions constituted gross misconduct, a willful violation of company policy, and have exposed Aura Air Group to significant financial and reputational damage, the woman recited. Your employment is terminated effective immediately. You will be escorted from the premises. Your final wood paycheck will be mailed to you. Catherine stared at the papers, her mind a maelstrom of disbelief and horror. The smirk she had given Elias Vance 2 nights ago replayed in her mind, but now it was a grotesque mockery of her own hubris. She had stood on her little patch of linoleum, a queen in her tiny kingdom, and had passed judgment on a king. Back in the London boardroom, the story of Catherine's downfall hung in the air. Elias listened, his expression unchanged. There was no triumph in it for him, no satisfaction. He saw it only as the logical outcome of a flawed equation, a necessary correction. Termination is a start, Elias said, breaking the silence. But firing one person doesn't solve the disease. It only removes a single symptom. The supervisor who ignored 17 complaints still has a job. The culture that allowed a manager to believe she could get away with this still exists. The system is still broken. He swiped to his final slide. It was titled The Aura Ascension Plan. "Here is what we are going to do," he said, his voice now imbued with the full weight of his ownership. "We are going to rebuild this company. From the inside out. Starting today." The trial was over. The reconstruction was about to begin. The karma that found Catherine Sterling wasn't a single explosive event. It was a slow, crushing cascade. Being fired was just the first stone in an avalanche that would obliterate the life she had so carefully built. She was escorted from her office by security, a humiliating walk of shame past the faces of colleagues who quickly looked away, not wanting to be associated with her spectacular fall from grace. Sarah, the young gate agent, watched from a distance, her expression not one of triumph, but of profound sadness and relief. Catherine believed she could find another job easily. 22 years of experience in airline operations was a valuable commodity. But the aviation industry, for all its global reach, is a remarkably small and interconnected world. The story of the gate manager who humiliated a new billionaire investor became a legend, whispered in crew lounges from Singapore to San Francisco. No official memo was sent out, but the message was clear. Her name was blacklisted. Her applications to other major carriers went unanswered. Recruiters who had once hounded her suddenly went silent. Within 6 months, she was forced to take a job managing a rental car kiosk at a dreary suburban airport, a humbling parody of her former life. The starched uniform was replaced by a cheap polyester polo shirt. The authority she once wielded was gone, replaced by the need to upsell insurance packages to weary travelers. She had once decided who flew in first class. Now she argued over fuel charges and dent waivers. But the real karma was quieter. It was the loss of her identity. She had been Catherine Sterling Gate Operations Manager. Her job was her entire world, the source of her pride and her power. Without it, she was just Catherine. A woman in her late 40s with a mortgage she could no longer afford, and a future that looked as grey and endless as a winter sky over the tarmac. Meanwhile, at Aura Airlines, the earthquake Elias Vance had triggered was reshaping the entire landscape. His ascension plan was not a suggestion, it was a mandate. He started with the culture. A new mandatory training program, developed in partnership with leading diversity and inclusion consultants, was rolled out company-wide. It was called The View from 22B, a name whose origin was known only to the board. It used the real-life case study of Flight 110 to teach employees about unconscious bias, the true cost of brand damage, and the principle that every customer deserved to be treated with the same dignity regardless of their appearance. Elias promoted Michael Corrigan, the JFK station director, who had acted swiftly to vice president of North American operations. His first task was to conduct a full review of every manager in the system. The supervisor who had ignored Catherine's complaints was demoted. Others with similar records were either retrained or removed. He personally championed Sarah, the young gate agent, who had told the truth. He had her flown to London, where he met with her, and offered her a position on a new customer experience task force. A team designed to identify and solve problems from the ground up. Her courage was rewarded, sending a powerful message throughout the company. Integrity would be recognized and valued above all else. The changes were not just cultural. Using the principles of Nexus Flow, Elias greenlit a massive $200 million overhaul of Aura's technology. The clunky, outdated systems were replaced with a streamlined, intelligent platform that managed everything from booking and upgrades to staffing and catering with predictive accuracy. He renegotiated the catering contracts, implementing a rigorous quality control system with real-time feedback from cabin crew. The dry chicken was replaced with meals that actually reflected the premium price passengers were paying. He increased cabin crew staffing on all long-haul flights, reducing burnout and dramatically improving in-flight service. Maria, the flight attendant from his flight, was promoted to a training role, teaching new hires the art of genuine customer care. Within a year, the results were undeniable. Aura's on-time performance, once its only prized metric, actually improved due to the new efficiencies. But more importantly, its customer satisfaction scores skyrocketed. The stock price, which had languished for years, began a steady, impressive climb. The airline, once a fading titan, was becoming sleek, modern, and respected. It was becoming a reflection of its new owner. Elias Vance rarely visited the boardroom anymore. He managed his investment from a distance, trusting the new leadership he had put in place. But one evening, about a year after that fateful flight, he found himself at JFK flying to London for a tech conference. He walked to the gate, a different man in a similar hoodie. The gate area was calm, organized. The agents were smiling, engaging with passengers. He watched as a young family, flustered and running late, were treated with kindness and efficiency. He saw an elderly man in a worn-out coat, clearly not a frequent flyer, being patiently guided through the boarding process by a manager. When he reached the front of the line, the agent scanned his pass, her eyes lighting up in professional recognition. "Welcome, Mr. Vance," she said with a genuine smile. "We have seat 1A ready for you. Thank you for being an Apex Circle member. We appreciate your loyalty more than you know." Elias smiled back. "Thank you," he said. "I appreciate it too." As he walked down the jet bridge and turned left into the serene, welcoming cabin of first class, he knew this was the real return on his investment. It wasn't the rising stock price or the glowing industry reports. It was this: a culture transformed, a promise kept. The quiet, profound satisfaction of knowing he had not just bought a company, but had helped it find its soul. The story of Elias Vance and Catherine Sterling is a powerful testament to the fact that true power is not found in a title or a uniform, but in character and respect. One woman's prejudice, born from a moment of arrogant judgment, set off a chain reaction that she could never have foreseen, proving that karma can sometimes be delivered not by fate, but by a $400 million stock purchase. This wasn't just about one man getting the seat he deserved. It was about an entire corporate culture being forced to look in the mirror and change for the better. If you believe that justice was served and that our actions, big or small, truly have consequences, then please give this video a like. It helps us share more stories like this with the world. Don't forget to share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. We want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever witnessed a moment where someone's arrogance led to their immediate downfall? Let us know below. Thank you for watching.